The email came through at 12:42 in the morning, lighting up my phone on the nightstand like a small accusation. I wasn't asleep. I rarely slept well in December. Christmas had a way of stirring memories I'd spent the rest of the year carefully shelving. Still, I didn't expect this. The subject line read simply, "Family decision." No greeting, no warmth, just that. I stared at the ceiling for a long second before picking up the phone. Somewhere down the hall of my apartment building in San Jose, a neighbor laughed, the sound drifting through thin walls like a reminder that other people were living easier lives. I opened the message. "We all agreed it would be best if you didn't come home for Christmas this year." That was it. No signature, but I knew who it was from. My mother always wrote like that when she wanted something to sound final, like a verdict instead of a choice. I read it again slower, waiting for the rest to load, waiting for a follow-up explanation, a softened edge. Nothing. Just those words sitting there heavy and cold. "Don't come home for Christmas." I swung my legs off the bed and stood up, my feet pressing into the cool floor. Outside my window, the city glowed in soft oranges and white streetlights reflecting off parked cars. Across the street, I could see a family through their living room window decorating a tree. A man lifted a small child onto his shoulders. The child squealed. Someone clapped. I closed the blinds. "My name is Claire Lawson. I'm 31 years old." And in that moment, standing barefoot in my apartment, I realized my family had just erased me with one sentence. The Lawsons had always been like that, polished on the outside, ruthless in private. At church, my mother hugged everyone too tightly and spoke about family values. At home, she measured love in usefulness. My sister Marlene understood that early. I didn't. I went to the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water I didn't drink. My hands were shaking just slightly, not from shock, from recognition. We all agreed. That meant there'd been a conversation. Probably over dinner. Probably with Marlene smiling politely while my father nodded along. My absence discussed like a scheduling conflict, a problem to solve. I opened my laptop and logged into the family calendar we'd used every year. It didn't load. A red banner appeared at the top of the screen. Access removed. I blinked at it. Tried again. Same message. The shared folder with recipes, travel plans, gift lists, even the seating chart I'd created for Thanksgiving dinners was gone. 6 years of history wiped clean. I laughed once, short and sharp. It sounded wrong in the quiet apartment. My phone buzzed again. This time a text from Marlene. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Mom just wants peace this year." Peace. That word, they always used it when they meant silence, when they meant compliance. I typed a reply. Deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that too. Every version sounded like begging, and I was suddenly too tired for that. I leaned against the counter and closed my eyes. Images rushed in, uninvited. Last Thanksgiving, driving 4 hours after a 12-hour shift because Mom said it wouldn't be the same without me. Arriving late. Carrying 2 pies. Marlene glancing at the clock and saying loud enough for everyone to hear, "Well, better late than never." No one saving me a seat. Eating at the kitchen island while they toasted family unity at the dining table I'd paid for. I opened my eyes. I hadn't imagined it. I hadn't been sensitive. I'd been convenient. The thought settled in my chest, heavy but oddly clarifying. I walked back to the bedroom and grabbed my phone. I didn't call my mother. I already knew how that would go. Calm voice, reasonable tone. The implication that I was emotional, dramatic, difficult. Instead, I opened my banking app. The family account was still there. Holiday fund. Balance just over $14,000. My contributions made up nearly all of it. I scrolled through the transaction history, catering deposit, decorations, wine club renewal, all approved by me. I remembered the call 3 weeks earlier. Mom's voice sweet. "You're so good with this stuff, Claire. Can you just handle it?" I'd said yes without hesitation. I always did. My phone buzzed again. Another text from Marlene. "We'll talk after the holidays." After. As if I were a mess to be cleaned up later. I set the phone face down on the counter. The hum of the refrigerator filled the silence. Somewhere outside, a siren wailed, then faded. For a long time, I just stood there, feeling the weight of it all. The years of being the reliable one. The quiet one. The one who paid and planned and showed up even when it hurt. Something shifted then. Not anger, not yet. Something colder, more precise. I opened a new folder on my laptop and named it simply Records. Inside, I started saving copies, bank statements, transfers, emails, every quiet contribution I'd ever made to the Lawson family machine. I wasn't sure why I was doing it. I just knew I needed to. When I finished, the clock on the microwave read 1:57 in the morning. I sank into a chair and stared at the screen. Records. The word blinked back at me. I thought about Christmas morning without me. Marlene in her perfect sweater, my mother arranging place cards, my father carving the roast, all of it powered by my absence, funded by my compliance. A strange calm washed over me. If they wanted a holiday without me, they could have it. Completely. I closed the laptop and stood up. Outside, the city lights flickered steady and indifferent. I whispered the words out loud, testing how they felt in the air. Let's see how this goes. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment everything changed. The moment the quiet daughter stopped absorbing the damage and started keeping score. And before Christmas arrived, the Lawsons would learn something they'd never expected. Silence can be preparation. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on my back staring at the faint crack in the ceiling above my bed, replaying my mother's sentence over and over until the words lost shape and became something uglier. Not come home, not needed, not wanted. By morning, the shock had thinned into something more useful. Clarity. I showered, dressed, and went to work like nothing had happened. That's what I'd always done. The Lawsons trained me well. Show up, perform, don't bleed where anyone can see it. At the office, my coworker Janet asked if I was excited to go home for Christmas. I smiled and said plans changed. She nodded sympathetically and launched into a story about airport delays. She had no idea she'd just brushed against a fracture line in my life. All day my phone stayed silent. No apology, no clarification, just the quiet confirmation that the decision had stuck. That evening I poured a glass of wine and opened my laptop again. The folder labeled Records waited for me. I clicked it open and began moving through the files more carefully this time, not just collecting, but reading. It didn't take long to see the pattern. Utilities for my parents' house in Sacramento, all under my name. Internet, water, electricity. Insurance renewals approved through my email. Even the property tax reminders were routed to me. I leaned back in my chair, heart thudding. I remembered the first time my mother asked me to help. I was 24, fresh out of graduate school, still believing competence would earn me security. She'd sounded flustered. "The bills are confusing, Claire. You're good at this stuff. Can you just put them in your name so you can manage them?" I had hesitated just for a second, but then she'd added, "Of course it's temporary." Temporary turned into years. I clicked into the mortgage documents next. My breath caught as the PDF loaded. There it was in black and white. Primary borrower, Helen Lawson. Co-borrower, Claire Lawson. I stared at my name until it blurred. 4 years of payments. Every month, like clockwork. Never late, never questioned. I scrolled down to the signature page. My signature sat beneath my mother's, neat and confident, like I'd believed in something then. I closed the file slowly. This wasn't just emotional exclusion. This was financial dependency dressed up as family. My phone buzzed. A voicemail notification from my mother. I let it play on speaker. Her voice filled the kitchen, calm and practiced. "Claire, I hope you understand this isn't personal. We just feel it's healthier if you take a step back right now. Marlene's under a lot of stress, and Christmas should be peaceful. Healthy, peaceful." I laughed softly, a sound with no humor in it. I deleted the message. Then another text came through. This time from my father. "Let's not blow this out of proportion. Call your mother when you've calmed down." When I've calmed down, as if my reaction were the problem, not their decision. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened a spreadsheet and started listing everything tied to my name. Mortgage, utilities, insurance, holiday fund. Each line felt like a thread I'd been holding without realizing it. Halfway through, my hands stopped shaking. I realized something then that should have been obvious years ago. They didn't exclude me because I was difficult. They excluded me because I was useful without being present. I paid better from a distance. The next morning, a message popped up in my inbox from an unfamiliar address. Subject line, checking in. It was my Aunt Rebecca, my mother's younger sister. We'd never been close, but she was the only one who'd ever slipped me a knowing look across the dinner table. "I heard you're not coming for Christmas," she wrote. "Just wanted you to know I don't agree with how this was handled." I stared at the screen, surprised by the sudden burn behind my eyes. I typed back carefully, "Thank you. I didn't realize anyone noticed." Her reply came quickly. "Oh, honey, I noticed years ago. Keep copies of everything. Keep copies." The words echoed in my head long after I closed the email. That night, I backed up the records folder onto a flash drive. I labeled it plainly and tucked it into the back of a drawer. Not because I planned to use it. Not yet. But because something in my gut told me I'd need it. 2 days later, Marlene finally called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. She didn't bother with pleasantries. "Did you tell Aunt Rebecca anything?" "No," I said calmly. She reached out to me. There was a pause, then a sigh sharp with irritation. "Look, Claire, this isn't about you." I almost laughed. Everything in my life had been about making sure it wasn't about me. "Then what is it about?" I asked. She hesitated. "Just logistics, space, you know how Mom gets." I pictured my mother orchestrating chaos with a serene smile. "I know exactly how she gets," I said. Marlene lowered her voice as if sharing a secret. "If you could just stop reacting, this would all go away." Reacting. I ended the call without another word. That was the moment something inside me hardened, not into cruelty, into resolve. I wasn't going to beg for a seat at a table I'd paid to set, and I wasn't going to keep funding a family that erased me when it was convenient. But I also wasn't going to explode. I'd seen how that story ended for women like me. Emotional, unstable, unreliable. No, if there was going to be a reckoning, it would be quiet, documented, unavoidable. I opened my laptop and renamed the folder. Records became evidence. I didn't feel triumphant, I felt focused. Christmas was a week away. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't preparing to please anyone but myself. As I shut down the computer, my phone buzzed again. A text from Marlene. "We still love you, you know." I stared at it for a long time. Then I typed a reply I'd never sent before. "I'm sure you do." And for the first time, I meant something very different than she did. Christmas decorations started appearing in the lobby of my office building the same week my family stopped speaking my name. A fake pine tree near the elevators. A bowl of red ornaments no one ever touched. Every year I'd felt a tug of obligation when I saw them. This year they felt like props from a play I'd finally stepped out of. I spent my lunch breaks doing something I'd never allowed myself before. Thinking. Not fixing, not smoothing, just thinking. By Wednesday, I had the full picture. It wasn't pretty, but it was clean. My mother's house ran on my credit. My parents' utilities, insurance renewals, and even the holiday catering were all tied to accounts I controlled. Not illegally, not secretly, openly. They'd asked. I'd agreed, over and over again. I remembered the language they used. "Just until things settle. You're better with details. We trust you." Trust. I went home that night and laid everything out on my kitchen table. Printed statements, highlighted dates, neatly stacked like exhibits. The order soothed me. I wasn't spiraling. I was organizing. My phone buzzed as I was labeling a utility bill. A group chat notification. For a split second, my heart jumped. Then I opened it. Family Christmas plan finalized. I wasn't in the chat, but the app still showed the group name change before I was removed completely. A small cruelty. Just enough to sting. I set the phone down gently. That's when I realized something important. They weren't worried about me showing up uninvited. They were worried about me noticing. That night I called my lawyer. Not a dramatic call, not an emergency, just a calm request for a consultation. David Miller had helped me with a contract dispute years earlier. He was practical, unflappable, and allergic to nonsense. When I explained the situation, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Claire, you understand you're not obligated to continue paying any of this." I smiled faintly. "I do now." He cleared his throat. "And you understand that freezing accounts you own or co-own isn't retaliation. It's boundary enforcement." Boundary enforcement. The phrase landed like a gift. I didn't act right away. I waited, watched, let the pattern continue. 2 days later, my mother emailed me an invoice from a catering company. Subject line, "Please handle." No greeting, no mention of Christmas, no acknowledgement of the exclusion, just expectation. I stared at the email until my coffee went cold. Then I forwarded it to David. His reply came within the hour. You're under no obligation to pay this. Document everything. I saved the email to the evidence folder. That evening, my Aunt Rebecca called. Her voice was low, careful. I shouldn't be telling you this, but they're telling people you chose not to come. I closed my eyes. Of course they were. Rebecca continued, they're acting like you're sulking, like this is your decision. I thanked her and hung up. The narrative was already being written without me. That was fine. Narratives collapse when they meet facts. The next morning, I logged into the holiday fund account. I stared at the balance for a long time. Money I'd set aside to make other people comfortable. Money that had never bought me a seat at the table. I didn't transfer it yet. I just sat there letting the weight of the choice settle. That afternoon, Marlene called again. Her tone was brittle. Did you freeze the insurance account? No, I said truthfully, not yet. Yet, she exhaled sharply. Mom got a notice saying something needs reauthorization. I kept my voice even. Everything is under my name. Reauthorization requires my consent. There it was, silence. Finally, she snapped, why are you doing this? I looked out the window at the city lights blinking on one by one. I'm not doing anything I said. I'm just not doing it anymore. She hung up on me. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. On Christmas Eve morning, I woke to a message from my father. Let's talk. Your mother is very upset. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my laptop and began methodically to act. First, the holiday fund. I transferred every dollar back into my personal savings. The confirmation screen blinked green. I took a screenshot and saved it. Next, the catering invoice. I logged into the vendor portal and requested a refund for the deposit paid under my name. Reason event canceled. Another green check. Another screenshot. I moved slowly, deliberately. Each click felt less like revenge and more like reclaiming oxygen. By noon, I'd paused the automatic mortgage payment. Not canceled. Paused. A boundary, not a bomb. The utilities came next. I scheduled service suspensions effective Christmas Day at 6 in the evening. Enough time for them to notice. Not enough time to fix it without me. When I finished, my hands were steady, my breathing even. I sat back and waited. The first message came at 4:20, from Marlene. Did you do something? I didn't answer. At 5:05, my mother called. I let it ring. At 6:15, my phone lit up like a switchboard. Texts, calls, voicemails stacking one on top of the other. The power had gone out. The caterer had canceled. The internet was down. Guests were arriving to a dark house. I stood in my kitchen, the glow from my lamp warm against the winter dusk, and listened to the city outside carry on like nothing had happened. I didn't feel giddy. I didn't feel cruel. I felt balanced. At 7, a single text came through from Marlene. You ruined Christmas. I typed back one sentence. No, I just stopped paying for it. I set the phone down and poured myself a glass of wine. Outside, a neighbor laughed. Somewhere, a carol played faintly on the radio. For the first time, Christmas felt quiet. And for the Lawsons, the silence had finally arrived with consequences. I didn't answer a single call that night. I let the phone vibrate itself quiet on the kitchen counter while I sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, listening to the hum of my own heater. Outside, the city moved on. Somewhere, someone was laughing. Somewhere else, a couple argued about what movie to watch. Normal life continued, indifferent to the fact that my family's carefully staged Christmas had collapsed in real time. At 8:30, curiosity got the better of me. I checked the news. Nothing yet. Of course not. To the outside world, the Lawsons were still the charming family who hosted generous holiday gatherings. This was still just chaos contained within 4 darkened walls. My phone buzzed again, a text from an unfamiliar number. It's Rebecca. They're in full panic mode. I closed my eyes and exhaled slowly. I imagined my mother's living room, usually glowing and warm, now lit only by the weak light of cell phones. Marlene pacing. My father snapping at the breaker box like electricity could be bullied back into submission. Guests awkwardly hovering near the door coats, still on smiles, stiff. Rebecca's next message came quickly. Your mom keeps saying this is a misunderstanding. I almost laughed. Misunderstanding implied accident. This was arithmetic. I typed back I didn't misunderstand anything. There was a pause. Then I know. Just wanted you to hear it from someone on the inside. I thanked her and set the phone down again. I didn't need play-by-play anymore. I already knew how this scene ended. Around 9, I poured myself another glass of wine and stood by the window. Snow had started to fall soft and slow, collecting on parked cars and tree branches. The city looked hushed, almost reverent. I thought of all the Christmas Eves I'd spent driving, cooking, fixing, smoothing. All the times I'd been exhausted before the day even started. This year my only responsibility was to myself. At 9:47 my phone rang again. Mom. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then I declined the call. A voicemail followed almost immediately. I didn't listen. I didn't need to hear her voice to know the shape of her words. Calm at first, confused, then wounded, eventually angry. I slept deeply that night. Christmas morning arrived pale and quiet. The snow had thickened, muting the city. I woke late, stretched, and made coffee. For the first time in years, I didn't rush. I didn't check my phone immediately. I stood at the window and watched flakes drift down like they had nowhere else to be. When I finally picked up the phone, the notifications stacked like a confession. Missed calls, voicemails, texts. The first text I opened was from Marlene. What did you think would happen? I stared at it, then locked the screen. Another from my father. Call your mother. This has gone too far. Too far. I listened to the first voicemail then. My mother's voice cracked through the speaker, brittle with forced composure. Claire, we have guests here. This is humiliating. You need to fix this immediately. Fix. That word again. I deleted the message. Then something unexpected happened. A news alert popped up on my phone. Local philanthropist's holiday event canceled amid power outage. No names yet, just speculation. A blurry photo of a darkened house. I felt a small, sharp twist in my stomach. Not guilt, awareness. This was no longer contained. By noon, the names appeared. By afternoon, the story had legs. Screenshots from guests, comments, rumors. Someone mentioned unpaid bills. Someone else mentioned a daughter who handled finances. My phone buzzed nonstop. Not just family now. Cousins. Old family friends. People who hadn't spoken to me in years. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I opened my laptop and watched the narrative shift. The polished image cracked, then split. Questions appeared. How does a family known for generosity lose power on Christmas Eve? Who was paying for what? At 2:15, I got an email from a local reporter. We've received documentation regarding the Lawson family accounts. Can you confirm their accuracy? My heart beat faster, but my hands stayed steady. I forwarded the email to David. His reply came minutes later. You're under no obligation to respond. But if you do stick to facts, no commentary. I considered it. Then I replied to the reporter with a single sentence. The documents are accurate. I won't be commenting further. That was all it took. By evening, the story was everywhere. Not national, not viral, but enough. Enough to dismantle the illusion my mother had spent decades constructing. Marlene texted again. You destroyed our family. I finally replied. No, I exposed it. The response was immediate. You're heartless. I set the phone down and turned it off. That night, I walked through my apartment touching things that were mine. The couch I'd bought myself, the dishes I'd chosen, the quiet I'd earned. I didn't feel victorious. I felt emptied, like something old and heavy had finally been set down. Late that night, as snow continued to fall, a single thought surfaced, uninvited but clear. This isn't the end. It's the pivot. They wouldn't stop. People like my mother didn't accept loss gracefully. They reframed, retaliated, rewrote history, and somewhere beneath the calm I knew the next move wouldn't be mine. It would be theirs. I was right about one thing. My mother didn't accept loss quietly. 2 days after Christmas, the calls stopped. The silence felt deliberate, not exhausted, like the pause before a breath is taken. I recognized it because I'd lived inside it my entire life. This was the Lawson reset. Retreat, regroup, reframe. I went back to work that Monday. People were polite in the careful way they are when they've seen headlines but don't know what to say. A woman from accounting stopped me near the coffee machine and whispered, "That must have been a lot." I nodded and thanked her for the coffee she'd poured without asking. Kindness. I was learning didn't need explanations. At lunch, my phone buzzed with an email from Marlene. Subject line, legal notice. My stomach tightened, but my hands didn't shake. I opened it slowly. The message was short and dramatic. Accusations of malicious interference, emotional distress, financial sabotage. At the bottom, a scanned letter on a law firm's letterhead. The language was sharp, confident, wrong. They're threatening to sue you, I murmured to the empty break room. I forwarded everything to David without comment. He called me 10 minutes later. They're bluffing, he said calmly, and they're sloppy. What do you mean? They don't understand the difference between ownership and entitlement. You didn't sabotage anything. You stopped paying for things you owned or managed. That's not a crime. I closed my eyes, relief washing through me like a delayed reaction. So what do I do? For now, nothing, he said. Let them make the next mistake. They didn't wait long. That evening, my father emailed me directly. No subject line, just a block of text that tried to sound reasonable. Your mother is devastated. This has gone further than anyone intended. We're prepared to forgive and move forward if you'll restore the accounts and apologize publicly. Forgive, apologize, restore. The order of the words made me laugh. I didn't respond. Instead, I opened my evidence folder and added the email. Then I poured a glass of water and sat on the couch staring at the wall. I thought about how easily they slipped back into old roles. Me as the fixer, them as the wounded party. That was when the second shoe dropped. The next morning, my manager called me into her office. She closed the door gently and gestured for me to sit. Her expression was careful, not unkind. Claire, she said, I want you to hear this from me directly. We received a call yesterday. My chest tightened. From who? A woman identifying herself as your mother, she said. She expressed concern about your mental health and claimed you'd been behaving erratically under stress. There it was. She suggested my manager continued that we keep an eye on you for everyone's safety. The room felt very still. I gripped the arms of the chair, grounding myself. And what did you say? I told her this was inappropriate, she said firmly, and that if she contacted us again, we'd involve HR and legal. I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. Thank you. She leaned forward. Claire, I don't know what's happening in your family, but I know your work. This doesn't change that. I nodded, eyes burning just a little. When I got back to my desk, I locked my computer screen and sat there, heart pounding. This wasn't about money anymore. This was about control. If they couldn't make me comply, they would make me look unstable. That night, I called David again. This time, my voice wasn't calm. They contacted my employer, I said. There was a pause. Then his tone changed. Okay, he said. Now we document aggressively. He instructed me to write a timeline. Dates, times, messages, calls. He asked for the voicemail transcripts. I'd deleted the texts. I'd saved the emails. He asked if I'd be willing to send a cease and desist letter. Yes, I said without hesitation. The letter went out the next day. Clear, professional, non-negotiable. Any further contact with my employer would be considered harassment. Any false statements would be addressed legally. Within hours, my mother responded, not with an apology, but with rage. You're trying to destroy us after everything we've done for you. I stared at the screen, something inside me finally snapping cleanly in half. Everything you've done for me, I thought. Or everything I've done for you. I didn't reply. Instead, I received a call from my Aunt Rebecca. Her voice was low, urgent. They're telling people you're unstable, she said. That you had a breakdown. That this is all because you couldn't handle being told no. I closed my eyes. The old shame tried to rise, familiar and poisonous. Then it passed. Thank you for telling me, I said. Please don't argue with them on my behalf. Why not, she asked. Because the truth doesn't need defending, I said. It needs documentation. That night I slept badly. Not from fear, but from anger sharpened into focus. I dreamed of locked doors and missing chairs. Of standing in rooms where everyone else pretended I wasn't there. When I woke, my phone buzzed with a new email. This one from the law firm again. A formal notice. They were proceeding. David called me before I could even finish reading it. They filed, he said. Which means they just handed us discovery. What does that mean? It means, he said carefully, they now have to open their books. The weight of his words settled slowly. My mother's immaculate spreadsheets. Marlene's carefully curated finances. The years of quiet dependency. They think this will scare you into compliance, David continued. It won't. It will expose them. I sat down on the edge of my bed, the room spinning just slightly. Are you sure? Claire, he said gently, you are the cleanest party I've seen in years. They've built their life on your silence. Courtrooms don't run on silence. After we hung up, I stood at the window and watched the city wake up. Cars moved, people walked dogs, life went on. I thought of my mother dialing my office, her voice calm and concerned, weaponizing care. I thought of Marlene rehearsing lines about my instability. I thought of my father asking me to apologize publicly. A strange calm settled over me. They wanted a fight. What they didn't realize was that they'd chosen the one arena where truth mattered more than performance. And for the first time, I wasn't reacting. I was ready. The official court notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, tucked between grocery flyers and a holiday card from a coworker I barely knew. I stood in the hallway of my apartment building, envelope in hand, feeling the weight of it before I even opened it. I didn't feel panic. Panic belonged to people who were unprepared. I felt something closer to inevitability. I carried the envelope upstairs, set it on the kitchen table, and made coffee before touching it. That small ritual mattered. It reminded me I was still in my own body, in my own space, living a life that didn't revolve around their approval. When I finally slit the envelope open, the language inside was stiff and formal. Filing accepted. Discovery scheduled. Timelines attached. Discovery. David had explained it over the phone, his voice measured and almost kind. Discovery is where stories meet documents, where feelings stop mattering and paper starts talking. For years, my family had relied on the idea that I wouldn't push back, that I'd get emotional or tired or ashamed. They hadn't planned for this version of me, the one who kept receipts. That afternoon, David and I met in his office. It was smaller than I remembered, lined with books and framed degrees. The windows looked out over a parking lot, unglamorous and honest. He slid a folder across the desk toward me. "This is what we'll be asking for," he said. "Bank records, property documents, business accounts, communication logs." I scanned the list, my pulse steady. "They won't like that." He smiled thinly. "That's not our concern." "What happens if they lie?" I asked. "Then they commit perjury," he said simply. "And judges don't forgive that." The word judge echoed in my head as I left his office. I'd spent my life avoiding confrontation, believing it would always make things worse. But this wasn't confrontation. This was structure, rules, a place where my mother's tone and Marlene's charm didn't carry weight. 2 days later, my mother called again. I didn't answer. She left a voicemail this time, her voice trembling in a way that sounded almost convincing. "Claire, this is getting out of hand. Lawyers are expensive, stressful. We don't need to do this to each other." Each other? I deleted the message and added it to my timeline. Date, time, content, pattern. Then something unexpected happened. Marlene emailed me. Not a threat, not an accusation, an invitation. "Can we talk, just us, no lawyers?" I stared at the screen, my chest tightening. This was new. Marlene never asked. She assumed. I forwarded the email to David. His response was quick. "You can meet if you want. Public place. No promises. Document everything." Against my better judgment, I agreed. Not because I owed her anything, but because I wanted to see her without the family theater. We met at a cafe halfway between our apartments. Neutral territory. She arrived late, wearing sunglasses indoors, her hair pulled back too tightly. She looked tired, not devastated, frustrated. She didn't hug me. She sat down and exhaled sharply. "I didn't think you'd actually go through with this." With what I asked calmly. "Court," she said, lowering her voice, dragging everything into the open. I took a sip of my coffee. "I didn't drag anything anywhere. You sued me." She flinched just a little. "This is ruining Mom," she said. "People are asking questions." I studied her face. The familiar impatience, the underlying fear. "They're asking questions because things don't add up." She shook her head. "You always do this. You make things complicated." "No," I said quietly. "I make them accurate." She leaned forward. "If you drop this, we can fix it. Mom will put you back in the will. We'll talk about Christmas next year." There it was, the bargain. I felt something inside me settle, like a final piece clicking into place. "You don't get to bribe me with belonging," I said. Her eyes flashed. "You think you're better than us now?" "No," I said. "I think I'm done being smaller." She stared at me for a long moment, then stood abruptly. "You're making a huge mistake." I watched her walk out without another word. I didn't follow. That night, David called with an update. "They've responded to Discovery," he said, "and it's interesting." My stomach tightened. "How?" "They turned over partial records," he said. "Missing years, incomplete statements, and they listed you as the administrator for several accounts they claimed you sabotaged." I closed my eyes. "They blamed me for the things they asked me to manage." "Yes," he said, "in writing." The absurdity of it almost made me laugh. Almost. "And there's more," he continued. "There's a trust. one you were never told about. My heart skipped. What kind of trust? Family trust, he said. Set up by your grandmother. You're named as a contingent beneficiary. The words landed hard. My grandmother had always slipped me extra cookies when my mother wasn't looking. Had told me I was different. Strong. What does that mean? I asked. It means David said carefully that your mother may have been misrepresenting assets and possibly misusing funds. The room felt suddenly very quiet. 2 weeks later, the deposition was scheduled. My mother first, then Marlene. I sat in the conference room during my mother's deposition, watching through the glass as she answered questions. She looked composed, almost serene, but her hands kept twisting in her lap. When the attorney asked about the utilities, she smiled politely. Claire handled those. She insisted. The lawyer slid a document across the table, an email, her words, asking me to take over. My mother's smile faltered. I didn't feel triumph. I felt vindication, a slow, steady unraveling. Afterward, Marlene's deposition was worse. She contradicted herself, forgot dates, claimed ignorance she clearly didn't have. The trust came up, her face drained of color. When it was over, David leaned toward me and whispered, "They're in trouble." On the drive home, I felt something loosen in my chest, not joy, release. They had built a version of reality where I was the problem. Discovery had punctured it cleanly. That night, I opened my journal and wrote a single sentence. Truth doesn't need to shout. It just waits its turn. I slept deeply knowing that whatever came next, it wouldn't be built on lies I was expected to carry anymore. The first real crack in my mother's composure came a week after the depositions. Not in court, not in front of lawyers. It came in the form of an envelope slipped under my apartment door. No return address. My name written in my father's handwriting, careful and slanted like he was trying not to be recognized. I stood there for a long moment staring at it. My coat still on keys, heavy in my hand. My first instinct was to leave it where it was. Silence had become my shield. But curiosity, the quieter kind that comes with readiness, pulled me forward. I picked it up and went inside. The envelope held copies, not originals. Someone was still trying to protect something. Inside were 3 documents: a partial will, a trust summary, and a handwritten note. Claire, you deserve to know what was meant for you. I'm sorry it took this long. Dad, my chest tightened in a way I hadn't expected. My father had always been the quiet accomplice, not cruel, just absent. I sat at the table and spread the papers out carefully like they might bruise if I touched them too hard. The will was my grandmother's, dated 15 years ago. Clear, explicit, assets to be divided equally between my mother and her children. All of them, including me. I read it twice, then a third time slower. The trust summary explained the rest. A family trust my grandmother had set up shortly before she died. Designed to protect assets. Designed to bypass manipulation. Designed apparently to include me. But the trust had been amended. Twice. Both times after her death. My name reduced, then removed. The signatures approving the changes belonged to my mother and Marlene. I felt cold then. Not shocked, not surprised. Cold in the way truth feels when it finally stops pretending. I scanned the handwritten note again. My father's apology was thin, almost embarrassed. He hadn't stopped it. He hadn't warned me. But he'd finally broken ranks. That mattered more than I expected. I called David immediately. He was quiet as I read the details aloud. Then he exhaled. "This explains a lot," he said. "Is it legal?" I asked. "That depends," he replied, "on whether the amendments followed the trust's requirements, and whether undue influence can be proven." Undue influence, another phrase that fit my life too well. Within days, David filed a motion to compel full disclosure of the trust amendments. The response from my mother's attorney was defensive and sloppy. Claims of clerical updates. Claims of misunderstandings. No originals produced. The judge didn't like that. For the first time since this began, the court ordered a forensic review. Bank records, signature verification, timelines. Everything my family had tried to keep vague was about to be measured precisely. That was when the messages started again. Not angry this time, desperate. Marlene left a voicemail at 2 in the morning. Her voice was unsteady. "This has gone too far," she said. "You're tearing everything apart. Grandma wouldn't have wanted this." I listened once, then archived it. Grandma had wanted fairness. She'd written it down. My mother didn't call. She sent emails instead, long ones, rambling, rewriting history, painting herself as a protector who'd made hard choices for the good of the family. She used words like sacrifice and responsibility. She used my childhood like a prop. I didn't respond. I forwarded everything to David. The forensic report came back 3 weeks later. I was at work when David called. I closed my office door and sat down hard in my chair as he spoke. The signatures on the amendments don't match your grandmother's original trust instructions, he said. And there are irregular transfers from the trust into personal accounts, your mother's. My stomach dropped. So she took money that wasn't hers? Yes, he said. And then blamed you for financial instability when you stopped funding her. I pressed my palm flat against the desk, grounding myself. What happens now? He paused. Now we counterclaim. The courtroom felt different the day the trust came up. Smaller, tighter, the air heavier. My mother sat straighter than usual, lips pressed thin. Marlene wouldn't look at me. When the judge asked about the amendments, my mother spoke with rehearsed calm. I acted in the best interest of the family, she said. The judge nodded once, then turned to David. He stood and handed over the report. We disagree, he said. The silence that followed was thick. The judge read, turned pages, read again. When she looked up, her expression had changed. Mrs. Lawson, she said, this court takes misrepresentation of trust assets seriously. My mother's hands trembled, just slightly. Marlene finally looked at me then. Her eyes weren't angry anymore, they were scared. The hearing was continued, investigations ordered, assets temporarily frozen, including the house, including the accounts I'd once managed. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited. Not many, just enough. Questions flew. Family betrayal, inheritance dispute, holiday fallout. I didn't stop. I didn't answer. I walked to my car and drove away, my hands steady on the wheel. That night my father called. His voice was quiet. I should have stopped her, he said. Yes, I replied. I don't expect forgiveness, he added. I'm not here to give it, I said. I'm here to end this. He sighed. Your grandmother would be proud of you. The words landed softly, unexpectedly. When I hung up, I sat in the dark for a long time. The old grief surfaced then. Not sharp, not overwhelming, just there. The loss of the family I'd thought I had. The loss of the one I'd tried to earn. But beneath it was something stronger. They hadn't just excluded me from Christmas. They'd erased me from my own legacy. And in trying to keep everything, they'd exposed everything instead. For years, they told me I was too much, too careful, too controlling. Now I understood the truth. I wasn't too much. I was the only one paying attention. The court's temporary freeze hit my family harder than anything I'd done before. I didn't need updates to know it. I could feel it in the sudden silence, the way the noise evaporated overnight. No more late-night voicemails, no frantic texts, no carefully worded emails pretending to be reasonable. When control disappears, so does the performance. I learned the details anyway. People always talk when they think you're no longer listening. It started with my Aunt Rebecca calling me early one morning, her voice tight with disbelief. They can't access anything, she said. The house, the accounts, even the trust distributions, it's all locked. I closed my eyes and let the words settle. Locked. They're furious, she continued. Your mom keeps saying this is temporary, that the court will realize she was just managing things. Managing. I thanked Rebecca and hung up. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt confirmation. For years I'd been told I imagined things, that I was reading too much into small details. Now the details were reading themselves out loud. The next hearing was set for mid-January. Until then, everything stayed frozen, including the family business. That part surprised me. I hadn't even known there was one. David explained it over coffee in his office, sliding another document across the table. Your mother and Marlene have been running a small consulting firm through the trust, he said. Nothing flashy, but it's been funding a certain lifestyle. I scanned the numbers, travel expenses, dinners, membership fees, and I was paying utilities so they could do this, I said quietly. Yes, he replied, indirectly. The realization didn't sting anymore, it clarified. 2 days later, Marlene showed up at my apartment unannounced. I knew it was her before I opened the door. She knocked the way she always had, sharp and impatient, like the world owed her an answer. I opened it part way. She looked smaller somehow, less polished. Her coat was wrinkled, her eyes rimmed red. We need to talk, she said. I didn't step aside. You can say what you need to say here. She exhaled sharply. You don't understand what you're doing. I studied her face, the sister I'd spent my life orbiting. I understand exactly what I'm doing. Her voice cracked. They froze everything, Claire. The house, the accounts. Mom can't access the trust. She's panicking. I waited. You could fix this, she said finally. If you just agree to settle, drop the claim, say it was all a misunderstanding. There it was again. The expectation that I'd clean up their mess because it was uncomfortable for them. I didn't cause this, I said evenly. The court did. She scoffed. Because you pushed it there. No, I said. Because you lied. Her face flushed. We did what we had to do, for who I asked. She opened her mouth, then closed it. For the first time in my life, Marlene didn't have an answer ready. You took something that wasn't yours, I continued. And you assumed I'd stay quiet because that's what I've always done. She shook her head, tears spilling now. You're destroying Mom. I felt a flicker of something then, not guilt, recognition. No, I said softly. I'm letting her face herself. She stared at me for a long moment, then laughed bitterly. You think this makes you better than us? I didn't raise my voice. It makes me done. She left without another word. That night I slept deeply. Not because everything was resolved, but because I wasn't carrying it alone anymore. The following week, subpoenas went out. To banks, to accountants, to the consulting firm's clients. The quiet little operation my family had hidden behind holiday smiles suddenly had to explain itself under oath. And that's when the real panic set in. My father called me late one evening. His voice was hollow. They're asking questions about money I didn't even know existed, he said. I leaned against the counter listening. Did you sign anything? Yes, he admitted. Years ago, your mother said it was routine. Routine. They're saying I could be liable, he whispered. I closed my eyes. For a moment, I felt the old instinct rise, the urge to protect, to fix, to step in. Then I let it pass. You should talk to your own lawyer, I said. The silence on the line stretched. You're not going to help me. I am, I said, by not lying for you. He exhaled slowly. You've changed. Yes, I said, I finally did. When the forensic accountant's preliminary findings were released, the tone of everything shifted. The numbers didn't lie. Funds moved where they shouldn't have. Expenses justified poorly. Amendments made without proper authority. The judge didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. When she ordered a full audit and warned of potential penalties, my mother's face drained of color. I watched from my seat, hands folded in my lap, heart steady. Outside the courthouse, a reporter called my name. Do you feel vindicated? I paused. Just for a second. I feel finished, I said. The article that followed wasn't kind to my family. It didn't need to be. It was factual. Dates, documents, quotes from filings. The kind of truth that doesn't shout, just sits there undeniable. Friends I hadn't heard from in years reached out quietly. I'm sorry, I always wondered. I'm proud of you. I thanked them and went back to my life. One evening as I was cooking dinner, my phone buzzed with a message from Rebecca. They're trying to sell the house. I smiled faintly. They couldn't. Not yet. Not without the court's approval. The house that had once been the center of every holiday, every performance, was now just another asset under scrutiny. Later that night, I stood at my window and watched the city lights flicker on. Somewhere across town, my mother was probably sitting at her kitchen table surrounded by papers instead of people. I didn't feel joy at that image, I felt distance. The tables had turned not because I flipped them, but because I'd finally stood up from my seat. And as the investigation deepened, one thing became increasingly clear. This wasn't just about what they'd taken from me. It was about everything they were about to lose by refusing to tell the truth. The day the story broke, I was standing in line at the grocery store debating whether I needed another carton of eggs. Ordinary decisions had become oddly grounding. They reminded me that my life was still mine even as my family's secrets were becoming public property. My phone buzzed in my coat pocket. Once. Then again. Then a third time. I ignored it until the cashier finished scanning my items and wished me a good afternoon. Only then did I step outside the cold air biting at my cheeks and check the screen. 3 missed calls, 2 texts, 1 email, all from numbers and names I hadn't seen light up my phone in years. Have you seen the news? Call me now. This is getting serious. I didn't open the email. I already knew what it would say. When I got home, I set the grocery bags on the counter and turned on the television for the first time in days. I rarely watched the news. Too much noise. Too many people pretending certainty. But this time, the noise was about us. The anchor's voice was calm, measured. A family dispute over trust assets has escalated into a broader financial investigation involving alleged mismanagement and unauthorized amendments. The screen shifted to a photo I recognized instantly. My mother's house, or what used to be her house. The one with the perfect porch and the wreath that changed with every season. The image was recent, bare, dim, no decorations. My stomach tightened, not with guilt, but with the strange sensation of watching a myth dissolve. The segment wasn't long, just long enough. It mentioned the court-ordered audit, the frozen assets, the trust established by my grandmother. It didn't mention my name. Not yet. I was referred to as an adult daughter who initiated legal action after being excluded from family decisions. Excluded. I turned off the television and leaned against the counter, breathing slowly until the room felt steady again. Within minutes, my phone buzzed. A text from Marlene. "This is humiliating. People are calling." I didn't reply. Another text followed. "Do you feel good about this?" I set the phone face down. That afternoon, David called. His voice was steady, but I could hear the edge of focus. "The coverage is accurate," he said, "and it's already changing the tone." "In what way?" I asked. "They're retreating," he said. "Your mother's attorney reached out this morning. They want to discuss settlement." I closed my eyes. Settlement. The word felt heavy with history. "On what terms?" "They haven't said yet," he replied. "But the fact that they're asking tells us something." That evening my father called. I almost didn't answer. Almost. When I did, his voice sounded older than I remembered. "It's everywhere," he said. "Neighbors, friends, the church." I waited. "Your mother hasn't left the house," he continued. "She says everyone's watching." I stared at the window, the city lights reflecting back at me. "People are asking questions," I said quietly. "That's not my fault." He sighed. "She says you did this to punish her." I swallowed. "I did this to stop lying." The line went quiet. For a moment I thought he'd hung up. Then he spoke again. "They're talking about settling, giving you something to make this go away." Something. "I don't want something," I said. "I want the truth on record." "You always were stubborn," he said, not unkindly. "No," I replied, "I was thorough." After we hung up, I sat alone in the quiet of my apartment, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound. I thought about how quickly narratives shift once they're exposed to daylight. For years, my family had told a story where I was difficult, distant, dramatic. Now there was another story competing with it. One backed by documents, timelines, and court orders. The next morning, the settlement proposal arrived. David forwarded it with a single line, read carefully. I opened the attachment and scanned the terms. A lump sum, a partial restoration of trust assets, a confidentiality clause. They wanted silence. I laughed once, short and sharp. Of course they did. I called David immediately. "I'm not signing this," I said. He didn't sound surprised. "I thought you might say that." "They want to buy quiet," I continued. "I already paid too much for that." He paused. "There's a risk in refusing," he said. "This could drag on." "I know," I replied. "But if I stop now, they'll say it was all a misunderstanding, that we settled privately, that they were right all along." He exhaled. "All right," he said, "then we counter." By the end of the week, the tone had changed completely. My mother's emails stopped. Marlene went silent. Their attorney grew cautious, clipped. The court scheduled another hearing to address the trust amendments specifically. The day before the hearing, Rebecca called me. "She's not doing well," she said quietly. I closed my eyes. "I'm sorry," I said and meant it. "She keeps asking where she went wrong," Rebecca continued. "She says she gave everything to her family." I thought of the bills, the trust, the amendments, the lies. "Giving," I said slowly, "isn't the same as controlling." Rebecca was quiet for a moment. "You're right," she said. The hearing was brief and devastating. The judge didn't scold. She didn't lecture. She laid out the findings plainly. Unauthorized changes, breach of fiduciary duty, misrepresentation. The trust would be restored to its original terms pending final resolution. I felt my breath catch, not with triumph, with finality. Outside the courtroom, cameras waited again. This time I stopped, just for a moment. "Why did you keep going?" a reporter asked. I thought about the grocery store, the eggs, the ordinary life I was building quietly piece by piece. "Because silence only protects the people who benefit from it," I said. That night, alone in my apartment, I poured a glass of water and stood by the window. The city hummed, unaware and unconcerned. My phone stayed quiet, no accusations, no demands. For the first time since this began, I felt something like relief. Not because it was over, it wasn't, but because the story was no longer theirs to tell. The morning after the judge restored the trust to its original terms, I woke before my alarm. The apartment was still dark, the city quiet in that brief pause before dawn. I lay there listening to my own breathing, waiting for the familiar knot of anxiety to tighten in my chest. It didn't come. Instead, there was space. That alone should have told me something was about to change. By 9 that morning, David called. His voice was calm, but there was something underneath it, a restrained urgency. "They've made a new offer," he said. I sat up, pulling the blanket around my shoulders. "Another settlement." "Yes," he replied, "different terms." I didn't answer right away. I walked to the kitchen, poured coffee, watched steam rise. Ordinary motions steadied me. "Send it," I said finally. The email arrived seconds later. I read it once, then again slower. This time there was no lump sum hush money, no sweeping confidentiality clause, no language about misunderstandings. The offer was stark, almost bare. Full restoration of my share of the trust. Reimbursement for every documented payment I had made on behalf of the family. Formal acknowledgement on record that I had not sabotaged any accounts. And one final condition. My mother would resign as trustee. I felt my breath catch sharp and unexpected. That was new. That was real. David spoke softly through the phone. "Their attorney knows the audit is going to get worse," he said. "They're trying to stop the bleeding." "And Marlene?" I asked. "She'd be removed as co-administrator," he replied, "permanently." I closed my eyes. For years, power in my family had flowed through those two women like an unspoken law. The idea of them losing it, not dramatically, not publicly screaming, but formally on paper, felt heavier than any apology could have. "What's the catch?" I asked. "There's always one," David said. "They want the case to end here. No further testimony. No expanded investigation beyond what's already been uncovered." I leaned against the counter. My reflection in the dark window looked older than I remembered. Harder. Clearer. If I accepted this, the legal battle would end. The public story would fade. My mother wouldn't be criminally charged, at least not through my actions. The trust would be corrected, but the damage would stop spreading. If I refused, the audit would continue. The truth would keep surfacing layer by layer until there was nothing left to hide. I thanked David and told him I needed time. The rest of the day passed slowly. I went to work, answered emails, nodded through a meeting I barely remembered afterward. Every few minutes, my mind returned to the same question. What do I actually want? Not revenge. I'd learned that already. Revenge burns hot and fast, then leaves you standing in the same ashes. Justice. That word came closer, but even justice had edges. It could heal. It could also destroy indiscriminately. That evening, Rebecca called. She didn't ask how I was. She didn't mention court. She just said, "Your mom asked about you." I closed my eyes. What did she say? "She wanted to know if you were eating," Rebecca said quietly. "Sleeping." I felt something twist in my chest, sharp and unwelcome. "Why now?" "Because she's scared," Rebecca replied. "And because everything she built her identity on is slipping away." I didn't respond. Rebecca sighed. "I'm not asking you to forgive her," she said. "I just thought you should know she's finally not in control." After we hung up, I sat alone in the dim living room, the offer open on my laptop like an unanswered letter. I thought about the girl I'd been at 22 signing documents because my mother asked. About the woman I'd been at 31 standing in a courtroom while the truth spoke for itself. I also thought about what it meant to stop. Not to give in. To choose an ending instead of dragging the story forward because pain demanded a witness. My phone buzzed again. A text from my father, just 3 words, "She's unraveling." I stared at them for a long time, then I set the phone down. That night, I dreamed of my grandmother. She stood in her old kitchen sunlight, slanting across the table, hands dusted with flour. She didn't speak. She just looked at me steady and kind, like she always had when my mother wasn't watching. When I woke, the decision felt quieter than I expected, but it felt right. I called David. "I'll accept," I said. He was silent for a moment. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I replied, "but I want one thing added." "Name it." "I want the acknowledgement filed with the court," I said. "Public record. I don't need them punished. I need the lie corrected." David exhaled slowly. "That's reasonable," he said, "and powerful." When the amended agreement came through, I read it carefully. Every word, every clause. My name spelled correctly, My role stated clearly, no ambiguity, no apology, just fact. I signed it the next morning. The pen felt heavy in my hand but steady. When I finished, I didn't feel relief right away. I felt something closer to closure beginning to form. Later that afternoon, my mother sent her first message in weeks. No subject line, no explanation, just one sentence. I never thought you would take everything away. I read it once, then I typed back. I didn't take anything. I just stopped giving it to you for free. I didn't wait for her response. I turned off my phone and went for a walk. The air was cold but clean, the sky pale and open. For the first time in months, the future didn't feel like something I had to defend myself against. The case wasn't over yet. The paperwork would take time. The emotional fallout would linger longer. But the balance of power had shifted permanently. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't bracing for the next blow. I was choosing what came next. The silence that followed the signed agreement felt different from the ones before it. This wasn't the sharp, punishing silence my family used when they wanted to control a narrative. It wasn't the anxious quiet of waiting for the next threat or accusation. This silence was wide, open, almost gentle. For the first few days, I kept expecting something to break it. A call from my mother, a furious email from Marlene, a last-minute legal complication. But nothing came. The court filings moved forward smoothly. The trust administrator was replaced. Funds were reassigned. Reimbursements processed. Everything happened with the unremarkable efficiency of systems doing exactly what they were designed to do when people stop interfering. I hadn't realized how much of my energy had gone into anticipating conflict until there was none left to anticipate. On the third day, I caught myself standing in my kitchen at 6 in the evening, unsure what to do next. No spreadsheets open, no emails to forward, no evidence to label, just me, the hum of the refrigerator, and the faint sound of traffic outside. So I did something radical. I cooked dinner slowly. Not the rushed, practical meals I'd perfected over years of late nights and emotional exhaustion. I chopped vegetables carefully. I let the sauce simmer. I set the table for one and actually sat down to eat. Halfway through, I laughed softly at myself. This apparently was what peace looked like. Ordinary, unimpressive, real. Work changed, too. Not in dramatic ways. No promotions, no speeches, just subtle shifts. I spoke up more in meetings. I stopped apologizing before stating an opinion. When my manager asked if I wanted to lead a new project, I said yes, without explaining why I was qualified. One afternoon, as I was leaving the office, Janet from accounting stopped me. "You seem lighter," she said. "Like you finally dropped something heavy." I smiled. "I did." She nodded as if that made perfect sense and went back to her desk. A week after the agreement was filed, Rebecca invited me to coffee. I hesitated before agreeing. She wasn't part of the damage, but she was close enough to it that seeing her felt like reopening a door I'd just closed. Still, I went. She hugged me when she saw me careful and brief. "You look steady," she said. "I feel that way," I replied. We talked about neutral things at first. Her garden, a neighbor's new dog, the weather turning colder. Then she cleared her throat. "Your mother is moving," she said. I didn't ask where. "She can't afford the house anymore," Rebecca continued. "Not without the trust, not without you." The words landed quietly. No triumph, no sadness, just truth. "She asked if you knew," Rebecca added. "I do now," I said. Rebecca stirred her coffee. "She says she doesn't recognize her life anymore." I thought of my mother's dining room, once staged and glowing, now stripped of its power. "Neither do I said. Rebecca looked at me carefully. "Do you feel guilty?" I considered the question honestly. "No," I said. "I feel finished." She nodded slowly as if she'd expected that answer. The only time the past truly reached for me again was late one evening when my phone buzzed with a message from a number I hadn't saved. I knew who it was anyway. It was my mother. I stared at the screen for a long moment before opening it. "I don't know how to be anything if I'm not needed." The sentence sat there exposed and fragile in a way I'd never seen from her before. For a split second, the old instinct surged, the urge to comfort, to reassure, to step back into the role she'd trained me for since childhood. Then I felt something else, respect for myself. I typed carefully. "I needed you to see me as a person, not a function." 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Then a reply came. "I don't know how." I read the words once, then set the phone down. Not because I didn't care, because I finally understood that teaching her was not my responsibility. That night I slept deeply. No dreams, no rehearsed conversations, just rest. In the weeks that followed, the story faded from public view. Another family scandal replaced it. Another headline. Another outrage. People moved on the way they always do. Only the people who had lived inside the truth felt the change it left behind. One afternoon, David called to confirm the final paperwork had been processed. "It's done," he said. "Cleanly." "Thank you," I replied. "You did the hard part," he said. "Most people don't." After we hung up, I stood by the window and watched the city shift into evening. Lights flickered on, cars moved steadily through intersections, life uncomplicated and ongoing. For years, I'd thought justice would feel loud, like vindication, like a moment everyone would witness. Instead, it felt like standing in a quiet room and realizing no one else had a claim on my voice anymore. That night, I opened my old journal, the one I'd used during the worst months. The pages were filled with notes, timelines, questions, doubts, evidence not just of what my family had done, but of who I'd been while surviving it. I turned to a blank page and wrote one sentence: "I choose myself without apology." I closed the journal and placed it back on the shelf. The next chapter of my life didn't need documentation. It just needed me. Spring arrived quietly, the way real change always does. One morning I opened my window and realized the air didn't bite anymore. It moved. It smelled like wet earth, and something green trying to decide if it trusted the world enough to grow. I stood there longer than necessary, breathing it in, letting the moment exist without narrating it to anyone else. The case was officially closed 2 weeks later. No ceremony, no courtroom drama, just an email confirming that all matters had been resolved and the file was sealed. I read it once, then archived it. Not deleted. I wasn't erasing my past. I was choosing where it lived. My life didn't transform overnight into something glamorous. There was no sudden romance, no dramatic career leap, no triumphant holiday montage. What changed was smaller and more permanent. I stopped flinching when my phone buzzed. I stopped rehearsing explanations for choices I hadn't made yet. I stopped measuring my worth by how useful I was to people who only loved me when I was quiet. One Saturday afternoon, I drove out to a coastal town I'd always passed but never stopped in. I parked near the water and walked until the sound of the waves drowned out my thoughts. The beach was mostly empty. A woman walked her dog along the shoreline. A man sat on a rock staring at the horizon like he was waiting for something to answer him back. I took off my shoes and let the cold water rush over my feet. It was sharp and grounding and honest. I laughed out loud, surprising myself. For years, I'd been bracing for loss, convinced that if I let go, I'd disappear. Standing there with the tide tugging at my ankles, I finally understood how wrong I'd been. Letting go hadn't erased me. It had returned me to myself. My mother didn't reach out again. Not directly. Rebecca mentioned she'd moved into a smaller place closer to town, that she'd started volunteering somewhere anonymous where no one knew her history or asked about her family. I hoped she found something real there. I truly did, but her healing was no longer my assignment. Marlene sent one message months later, just 3 lines. "I still don't agree with what you did, but I see now why you did it. I hope you're okay." I read it twice, then replied with a single sentence. "I am." That was all. No reopening, no reckoning, just an ending that didn't need to bleed to be true. At work, I turned down a promotion that would have required constant travel. A year ago, I would have said yes out of fear, afraid that refusing meant wasting an opportunity. This time I said no, because I liked my mornings. I liked cooking dinner. I liked having energy left at the end of the day to feel my own life instead of collapsing into it. Instead, I took on a mentorship role. Younger women mostly, smart, capable, too quick to apologize. When one of them said I don't want to cause problems, I heard my old voice echo in her words. "You're not a problem," I told her gently. "You're a person." She looked at me like I'd handed her a map she didn't know she was allowed to read. On my birthday that year, I did something I'd never done before. I celebrated it without inviting anyone who made me feel small. No family obligation, no forced smiles, just a quiet dinner with 2 friends who knew the whole story and never asked me to justify it. We ate, we laughed, and when they sang to me, I didn't wish for anything. I already had it. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I opened the journal one last time. The pages that once held fear and strategy now felt distant, like notes from a life I'd graduated from. I didn't tear them out. I didn't burn them. I simply turned to the back and wrote, "I survived what tried to shrink me. I kept my dignity. I kept my name." Then I closed the book and placed it on the shelf not as evidence but as history. People sometimes ask if I regret how far things went, if I wish I'd handled it differently. I always pause before answering, not because I'm unsure, but because the truth deserves respect. I regret staying silent for so long. I don't regret stopping. Justice didn't come in the form of punishment. It came as separation, as clarity, as the quiet authority of choosing myself without needing permission. If you're listening to this story and something in it feels familiar, let me tell you the part no one ever told me. You don't have to be cruel to be done. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. And you don't have to carry the weight of other people's comfort at the expense of your own humanity. Sometimes the bravest revenge is refusing to keep paying the price for someone else's lies. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been erased, excluded, or made to feel invisible by the people who were supposed to protect you, you're not alone. Share your story in the comments. I read them. I see you. And if you want more stories like this, stories about justice, truth, and the quiet strength it takes to reclaim your life, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay with me. Your peace is not too much to ask for. It's everything.